All right. Hello, everybody. How you all doing today? Welcome to this week in supervision, and we are so excited. I'm so excited to be presenting to you some of the things that we talked about in our supervision groups this week. And I'm hoping that it will be helpful for you in practice as well as when you are running your groups. The topic for today is, and I haven't been talking about this a lot, and I would like to, get into this a little bit more with my groups. I think it's so essential to understand the dynamics and differences between someone who has narcissistic traits and then someone who is people pleasing, because these dynamics show their presence strong when we're talking about attachment, when we're talking about relationships in general, and so many other different dynamics. Generally, in every relationship, you have at least one person that represents someone with the narcissistic type of traits versus the codependent type of traits. Not in a major dysfunctional way, but just when you study it a little bit and you really look at your relationship, we kind of represent this, but not from the perspective necessarily of narcissistic personality disorder at all. It's just the dynamics are very important to understand, especially when you get into relationships, understanding relationships, the dynamic. Anyway, I'm getting off course, but let's focus on the title here. It is When a Narcissist Client Attacks, focusing on pain versus behavior. Can you do that? Can you do that? Have you ever been in an experience with a client when the client actually has a narcissistic attack? A narcissistic client has an attack on you. How are you able to respond to that? We're going to get into what we talked about during our supervision. And I want you to I want you to be thinking about how you would handle some of these situations. And so we're going to go on and jump into it. And I'm going to see if I can share my screen in a moment. But um, what I want to talk about, well, normally what I do when we start is we'll start off with a test question, right? Start off with a test question, right? And so the first test question, I'm gonna pull it up on the screen right now as I'm fumbling through here. Um, Now, the first test question is, which of the following is not a DSM 5 symptom of narcissistic personality disorder? Which of the following is not a DSM 5 symptom of narcissistic personality disorder? Finally, got it on the screen here. And we have, and this was an easy one. This was an easy one. A grandiose sense of self-importance. B, a lack of empathy. C, fear of abandonment. D, fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, or beauty. Which of the following do you feel is the answer here? We're thinking about narcissistic personality disorder. We're not talking about narcissistic traits here. We're talking about the actual disorder and what are the symptoms of the disorder. I like to challenge my groups to ask them, what are the symptoms? Off the top of your head, do you know some of the symptoms? Sometimes I say, tell me the signs and symptoms or some of the symptoms, DSM symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder. And I say, put it in the chat. Well, in this situation, we gave a multiple choice question, and maybe you got the answer right. This one was an easier one. It is B, lack of empathy. This is not a characteristic of someone who has narcissistic personality disorder. And if you've been following, we've been talking a lot about borderline personality disorder. In borderline personality disorder, we know that many times they can be impulsive, and we know that they have a fear of abandonment. Okay, that's more likely a criteria for someone who has a fear, who has borderline personality disorder. So the answer to this one would be C. Wow. And so here my notes are going off. I think that's a first. So we're going to stop the screen here and we're going to see if we could pull that back up. Um, let's see. And so we talked about that. Narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. There are a lot of traits and characteristics that are actually similar in both of these disorders, but we want to be able to separate them. Now, what I was going to show you is a mnemonic that we use many times for narcissistic personality disorder. And many times, what I'll do is use mnemonics to help us to bring it home, to help us to bring it home as far as when we can't automatically recall the symptoms right off the top of our heads. Many times, the mnemonics will help us to get through for some of us that learn and work well with mnemonics. And so, we're going to try this again, and I'm going to show you the mnemonic. The mnemonic that I use for narcissistic personality disorder is special. Okay. And as you can see here, this is special. And if you can recall this, special in this case will be spelled with three E's. Okay. And so if you're able to recall this, then you can give a detailed description and break down what narcissistic personality disorder is, because it captures pretty much all of the symptoms that are a part of narcissistic personality disorder. So again, we're trying to build up the competency and skill, but in practice, but also helping them to be able to recall and memorize, being able to identify what symptoms are of the symptoms are of certain diagnosis, and what we do once we see these symptoms. And so we moved on to a case scenario, and I always like to present case scenarios, and this one was a fiery one. Okay. And so I'm going to read it to you. We have here a clinician. I don't want to distract here. So here we go. A clinician is working with a client who has been court ordered to therapy after repeated workplace harassment complaints. What would you do in this situation? All right. The client frequently demeans the therapist. That's you. The client is demeaning you on a regular basis. The client frequently demeans you, okay? Insists that they are smarter than you and smarter than everyone else, right? And demands special scheduling outside of the clinic's policies. It's just something about narcissists sometimes, whether it's traits or whether it's personality disorder, that they just seem to just want to have it their way. And many times they are stuck in the id impulse. Okay. They want what they want when they want it, and they don't care about the consequences. Okay. So they're not caring about, your rules. Those rules don't apply to me, because a part of narcissistic personality disorder, which one is that? Where they don't feel like they're confined to rules. Well, we could say conceited, arrogant, but the one that I'm thinking about is entitled. They feel very entitled often. Narcissists do. So if this was the situation that you were working with, man, how would you deal with it? So a lot of times, when I'm talking about criticisms and things like that, if they're being harshly critical of you, this is something when I talk with the supervisees about, that we have to be very mindful of, because sometimes this is a narcissist ploy. Mm, I want to say most times I want to say it like that, but in many cases, a narcissist is really not going to come into your office unless they're being forced to be there. Like, we do domestic violence classes and anger management, and many times we see many narcissists there. And I'm not going to get into that about how they'll have their wives or girlfriends to call in to set up everything after they have already whooped their tail and all this stuff like that. But anyway, but that's what they do. But you know what? When they come to our class, we have awesome coach, and there's changes made. But this is the thing, is that many times they want things their way, and they can approach you in a way that's so direct. They have a very precise skill, a fine-tuned skill to almost, after entering into the room and seeing you, they can see into your soul in a sense, and understand right off what your weaknesses are. So this is important if you're in practice, and we talk about countertransferences. You have to be to a place to where you are really confident about what you do, so that you're not shaken by a narcissist, or not fearful of narcissists, because you will know who they are when they come into the door. And they may attack you in a way that feels like it's below the belt. And if you're used to getting dysregulated when someone attacks, that might happen in the therapy room. So we talked a little bit about countertransferences, and how narcissists will hit below the belt. But what if this was your client, um, let's just say, what if this was your client at home? And right now, really quickly, I'm going to show a short video. Now, I'm going to warn you, this video is pretty live. Okay, this video is pretty live. I don't know if you all have seen a movie. I think it's called Marriage Story, and it's a lot. So this might get your heart rate up a little bit. So, but it's really brief. And we're going to pretend that this is our narcissistic client just to give you a look. They probably wouldn't come into your office like this, but we're going to pretend this is the person that you're dealing with as we try to case them. Okay. So check this out. All right. Uh-oh. No, I'm going to, let's go.
Day I wake up and I hope you're dead. Dead like if I can guarantee Henry would be okay, I'd hope you get an illness and then get hit by a car and die.
And that's it. That's probably all we can handle today. Wow. That was a lot, wasn't it? And you know what I've noticed, right, in just seeing that, it just echoes some of the cases that I've seen and with someone who's like this, and how the spouse, like the woman there, sometimes they're so used to this that they're just numb. The things that you see, your eyes are like you're trying to keep, your eyes from being big, from hearing how they're talking and how they can be degrading or sarcastic or very demeaning. But many times the spouse has been desensitized to this. Why is that? Why is that? And so we talk about those things too. And many times the spouse is desensitized because, for one thing, they've been with that person for a while. But a lot of times, what it really is, this is not their first exposure. They have been exposed and attracted, unconsciously ended up with someone like this because they are much like what they experienced at home. So we went on to process this, and so let's go on and see if we can share the screen again and get this back up. But we processed this, and we want you to again take a view as if this was your client. So what I asked the clinicians is, who thinks that they would be able to focus more exclusively on the narcissist's pain versus their actions? The narcissist's pain versus their actions. This is super important with if you're dealing with very activated clients such as narcissists, or if you're dealing with someone who might have borderline personality disorder or something like that. They may act in ways that when they become dysregulated, that may be feel imposing, okay, on you. And so are you able to stay focused? So we talked about some things that might help you to stay focused during an exchange like this. Um and so, yeah, we're gonna skip past this. So one of the things we want to be mindful of, that they may disrespect you. This client has been not non-compliant with you. Do you have the right to fire them at this time when they're acting this way? This client has walked out of your sessions before it was over because they say, you know what, I don't like what you're saying. I'm done. I'm out of here. Like, and you're supposed to continue to bring them into the office. It takes a special skill, doesn't it? This is what we want to train our supervisees how to respond to this. So it's important, you all, to explore a few things. Oh my goodness. It's important to explore a few things here. And what we want to do is explore the function of the behavior. So you want to ask yourself, what does, because when we're dealing with somebody like this, we don't want to just see the behaviors. We want to be able to be beneath the surface to understand and have a perspective as to why these behaviors are occurring. And we can do that a lot of times with very little information. Want to ask yourself, what does demeaning the therapist accomplish for this client? Think about that. Okay, if they have been demeaning you, what is it accomplishing for them? What is it accomplishing for this client to be this aggressive with their spouse? There's something that's going on here besides the client. We talked about clients that we feel are jerks or just, whatever. And we just can't do that as therapists. It goes a little bit beyond that. So you got to ask yourself the question. And what happens is many times this person protects is protecting the fragile self-esteem from shame. So if that person is protecting the fragile self-esteem from shame, then that means that something had to occur. And this is something that we have to be able to detail. And somebody told me I was kind of on point with this because I haven't seen the movie, but my thing was that you know what? There was something that likely happened in this conversation that was said that hit home for this client and it dysregulated them. Okay. So that's what's going on beneath the surface. When we get back to the question, as to that's relative to, why would they be demeaning someone? Why would they be demeaning the spouse? Why would you demean the therapist? Well, if they're being demeaning to you, at some point, some of them just walk in the door being demeaning and want to ask you all your credentials and make you know all this kind of crazy stuff, and you just got to roll with it, right? You just got to know how to set order in the therapy room. But anyway, but let's just say there's an exchange and you're trying to help them. Maybe they're in couples and you have addressed the other spouse, and now it's time to address this spouse about concerns that they need to straighten up, and then they start coming for you, right? Many times it's because there was something that brought about shame. See, defensiveness often is a matter, and we talked about this, is shame based. You may have hit them in a point to where they're not ready to be vulnerable again. They're seeking to regain a sense of control. So this is the way that they gain control, is by coming for you. Okay. There's something going on. They're not just doing it. There's something that's beneath it. They may be intimidated. They may feel vulnerable. There's a number of things. So again, why might a narcissistic client say what they said to, like what he said to his wife in this situation? Um, well, another reason, if the client is responding in this way to his wife, what should this should be telling. So I had a client who was very dysregulated and somewhat kind of, was getting me a bit, right? Because they were just very rude and trying to take over the session. And my thing is this: if you have a client that's like killing it on the ace, 10 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, and they're having borderline type of symptoms, borderline personality symptoms, or maybe some signs of narcissism. You've got to be able to predict that, you know what, me getting closer to this person as we are starting to learn about you, because things were going well overall in the midst of the chaos, but you got to understand that, you know what, if you start to get close to this client, it should be predictable that they're going to likely try to sabotage the situation. But you should not be thrown off by that. You should not counter transfer because of that. You should take this as a sign of progress in many cases, because it's expected that this has been the pattern of all of their relationships, is what you'll see many times, i.e., why they're in the therapy room. Why would they just leave out? If you have couples, why would they just leave out of the therapy room, if they're trying to save their marriage, or if they're trying to get some good one-on-one from you and you're trying to help and support them? Why would they just leave out? Okay. So the thing is that the reason that they might be leaving out is because you've been hitting in some vulnerable places and they have never been used to being vulnerable. Vulnerability perhaps may have been suggested to be weak. Extreme demeaning statements can protect the client from feelings of humiliation, abandonment, or powerlessness. Again, I'm getting back control. Extreme demeaning statements. I'm coming for you. I wish you would die. This is protection and keeping them from feeling humiliated because it was something that you said that may have triggered them, because maybe it was true. Doesn't mean you were rude. Okay, let me stick with the script. We got to end it. By protecting the hatred towards the client, the hatred outward, the client avoids acknowledging their own deep pain, fear, and dependency. Why might a client be so fearful of vulnerability? Okay, I like this one. Many narcissist clients grew up in environments where showing vulnerability was unsafe. They learned early on from caregivers, They learned early on that caregivers were emotionally unavailable, rejecting, or critical. Vulnerability for them gets equated with danger. Sounds like borderline personality disorder. These things kind of cross over sometimes. So, um, when you're real quick, we got to end it. When you are the therapist, you've got to remember that the goal is not to win against the narcissist defenses. Be careful with that one because they like to get the last laugh. But to use the you sometimes you got to make them feel like they're winning. But to rupture uh but to use the rupture as therapeutic material while maintaining professional boundaries and self-respect. Sometimes you need to journal what you're experiencing if you're starting to feel countertransference and things like that. Something we talked about leveling the nervous system and breathing out. If you can't breathe in front of the client, you need to, because when we get upset, our breath starts to get short. Got to exhale. They might not see you. You don't want them to see you. You just let it out. Okay. Exhale. Journaling, reframing, remind you. I can't go through everything, but this is what we talked about, you all. I hope that this is helpful. Now, I do want to remind you of really quickly of some of the things that we have coming up. And we do have a free training coming up next month. We're still getting the marketing together for on that, but we do have the supervisor training as well coming up on November 3rd and 4th. Um, if you would like to be a supervisor, we'd love for you to attend. And then we have the online DSM course that we've been getting great. We have a new one and getting a lot of great responses from on that. And you can get that. I'll leave the links here and you can take that at your own pace. We're going to wrap it up for today. I hope this has been helpful for you. You all take care and have a blessed weekend. All right. Bye bye.